rebuilding confidence, and harmonizing with nature. With over 4 decades of changing lives, your self-discovery archaeologist, get ready to be the best of you with your host, Beverly Zimet.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Beverly Zimet Show, where being that best you keeps getting easier with every guest I have. And today, okay, we're going to do this. Marisa Ferrera. Yay! She's out of Ontario, but currently living in Colombia, she says, because it's warmer. Well, I can relate to that. So, how are you today?
I'm excellent. I was really looking forward to having this conversation with you and seeing where we're going to go.
I know. We never know where this show is going to take us. So that's the fun part about the whole show. So what is it that you like about Colombia that drew you down there?
Well, what drew us is the weather. My husband and I got really tired of the long, cold Canadian winters. And actually back in 2009, we sold and gave away most of our personal belongings and started scouting the warmer parts of the world. So we spent some winters in Costa Rica, Panama, and Chile before we ended up in Colombia. And then when we got here, because of all the, other places we lived, we knew we found our slice of paradise.
Oh, I like that. Slice of paradise. Wow. That's kind of cool. I like that. Yeah, I've been traveling myself, since like 97. So constantly going all over the place. And I don't know. My slice of paradise is like wherever I land. And,
well, you can create that anywhere you are, right?
Yeah, sure. I think so. And it's
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you, this 2020 has been an interesting challenge for that slice of paradise. It's the movement isn't quite as easily adaptable, shall we say?
Well, sure, yeah, because people are restricted, they can't travel like before, and I feel so blessed that I keep telling people if we had to be stuck anywhere during this time, this is a great place to be stuck.
Yes, it sounds like it. I tell you, it's starting to get wintertime up here in Colorado, so we're getting some colder weather, and it's been a long time since I've been in the cold, so it'll be an interesting winter, shall we say, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so what do you and your husband do down there? Are you guys in the same business? Do you have your own? What keeps you ticking down there?
Well, my husband used to have his own business when we were back in Canada. He had his own land surveying business, but he sold that back in 2001. It's been quite some time. I was going to say 2011. I'm like, no, we were already gone by then. But yeah, so he's pretty much retired, but he likes to do things on the internet as well. He's actually just exploring a new business opportunity, but he likes to just kind of do whatever floats his boat, and it changes from time to time. But for me, I have my own online business as well in coaching and mentoring. So I support open-minded men or women who are struggling with family relationships, one or more. And I just help them to really create healthy boundaries and learn how they can deal with conflict in a way that can be more loving for themselves and for the people around them.
Oh, that is so needed today. Oh my goodness. With everyone, just being in those confined areas, right? That,
yes. Because when we're confined, what happens is that any of the challenges that you might have been able to ignore because you're not together so much, they just become magnified, right?
Yes, they do.
In the same space. And even if you're, having difficulty with people that aren't living in the same space with you, the fact that you are in a very different environment right now can also bring up those issues and make them bigger.
Yeah, and and sometimes we have issues outside of the home, like you just mentioned, that just kind of, when things happen in the home, they trigger, and they just kind of emerge into each other, and it's like, oh my gosh, and and the time element and the uncertainties, I think the uncertainties is what really gets a lot of people, because we don't know what's happening from one day to the next, and being confined, the human element wasn't meant to be confined, right? And that can be challenging. So
sure.
yeah.
And we know that, whenever we experience any kind of stress, or anxiety, it's going to increase the conflict that you have within yourself and with the people
Right.
around you that you're communicating with. It just brings everything to the forefront. You can't hide from it anymore, which isn't a bad thing, actually. I actually
No, I
really
agree.
think it is. We think it is. It's like, oh no, I don't want to deal with conflict. So many people want to hide from conflict and bury it, but I try to encourage people to use conflict as opportunities to really look at the parts of themselves that are still in need of healing so that they can
Right.
actually through the conflict in a way that actually brings them closer together with the people they care about instead of it continuing to separate them more and more.
Exactly, because like you said, that separation, it separates the self, too, and it all
Yes,
begins inside.
it sure
We
does.
swallow these things, we try to hide these things, we can run from them. Well, we can't run so much anymore because there's no place to go. I mean, where do you go from the living room to the dining room to the bathroom to the
Yes.
kitchen?
Yes,
It's
but
us.
even when we think, even when we think we're running from it, even if we're not confined to our homes,
No, it's still there.
we take everything that's inside us, we take it with us no
That's
matter
right.
where we go, right?
Yeah.
So we can pretend that we're running from it, but what happens then is it just kind of pops up in unconscious ways. So why not become
Right.
conscious of it so that you can use it to your advantage instead of it becoming a hurtful situation for you and
Right,
others.
and we've known from science, it's been proven that holding in emotions and different issues and conflicts, that it will cause the body to begin to break down in different dysfunctions and stuff like that, which aren't healthy,
Exactly.
and we set ourselves up to be busy, right?
Mhm,
And that we kind of think, oh, well, if I'm busy, then I don't have to think about it and it'll go away. It doesn't go away. It's kind of like the old saying, you can run from everything, but you can't run from yourself because you turn around and poof, there you are.
There you are. Exactly. So you may as well face yourself and love all parts of you. And I think that's an
Right.
important part when we do start taking the time to listen to what's going on,
Right.
to really do so with a lot of self-love and compassion, not to beat ourselves up,
Oh gosh,
because
and
that's not going to help you.
we become experts at beating the self up,
Mhm.
and that's that self awareness and consciousness, that we are just conscientious about. Oh my gosh, how's my hair look? How's my clothes look? Is my makeup right? Is this
Right.
it just continuously goes on and on and on and on, right? And so, but when we can recognize an inner conflict, it's usually related to an outer conflict that we've turned it inside, and it's that lack of communication. So if we lack communication with the people around us, it's because we're lacking communication with ourselves, and I like to say, when people ask me, it's like, well, who do you travel with or whatever, I say, it's just me, myself, and I. And they just kind of look at you kind of funny, but I have no problems with me, myself, and I. We get along great. Did we always get along great?
Right.
Not so much.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you learn to get to really know who you are and what you are. And when my journey started back in 1974, it was my total loss of identity
Mhm.
that got me on my journey.
Wow,
And
that's really interesting.
so when you look at where is that conflict, the
Mhm.
conflict has to do with the identity and the truth of who you are. But it all starts in here. When you can alter and shift everything on the inner, the outside world begins to change.
Big
Right.
time, big time.
And
And it's
so-
interesting you said that because that was how my journey started too. It was back in probably more like 1978, or maybe 76 actually, when I went to college and I recognized that I didn't have a self-identity. I didn't know who I was. I didn't
Right.
know what I liked, what I didn't like, what my opinions were, nothing, because I was so suppressed, from my dysfunctional upbringing and traumatic upbringing that I just kind of completely shut down. And I realized I didn't want to be like that for the rest of my life. So yeah, that's sometimes what happens to people is when we recognize that is this it? Is this how my life is going to be forever? And
Right.
no, we can make changes anytime. It's never too late.
No, that and that's a key phrase you just said there. It is never too late. So it doesn't matter. What matters is that you make the action to make that change, because change is going to happen around you no matter what. The question
Exactly.
is, are you going with or without it?
Yes, yeah,
and
exactly.
because it's going to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we look at this identity thing, and it's identity by association. So when you stop to think, who are you? What is your identity? Because and I'm sure you get the same thing when you ask someone, so, well, who really are you? And they start saying, well, I'm a mom, and and I work here, and I do this, and it's all by association. Okay, now we know what you do and what you are, but who are you? And that's a deep one, getting into the centerness of who we really are. And sometimes it can be, upsetting. It can bring up that anger. My gosh, I had so much anger, when I started on my journey. I mean, I was just like ready to slaughter the world, because again, what do? We blame outside of ourselves instead of really looking inside. Right? It was everybody else's fault. It wasn't mine. And once you can release your angers and stuff and turn around and start looking at yourself, it doesn't look good, doesn't taste good, doesn't feel good. But I'll tell you, once you really clean it up, you're like, wow, I really am this amazing person, by golly, I think I got the world by the tail,
Exactly. And it's true, it can get messy when we start looking inside, and it can, be a painful experience. And yet, if we don't make that conscious decision, we continue to carry that inner pain, and it comes out anyways, and it just doesn't ever end. It just gets worse and worse as time goes on. So it's worth, taking that time, like you said, to do some of that inner work and recognize that you're not who you've been conditioned to believe you are. You're so much more.
Right.
I mean, I tell people, I believe we are all, magnificent beings of light, and we're here to, explore the world and experience joy, and just to, create whatever it is that we want to create and experience in this world.
Right.
And there are no limitations except the ones we place on ourselves.
Right here, right between the 6 inches,
exactly,
right?
Exactly. And where did that come from? It came from our past conditioning, right? So the trauma and the wounds that we've had from the past, and we've all had them. I mean, people might say, sometimes people will tell me, oh, I had a really great childhood, everything was really good. But then when we go a little bit deeper, they start to recognize that there were some things that were going on there. It doesn't have to be like, as traumatic as mine, with, emotional or physical abuse, but it can be more subtle. But it's,
and a lot of times it is subtle.
Yeah.
And so it's those subtle things that we make excuses for, we justify. I mean, even the big things, we justify it. And then we think that it's going to make it go away. It's interesting where science has really stepped in with all the different technologies that they have, and they're saying that 50% of all your beliefs, in what happened in your childhood and growing up years and stuff, are a lie. And I would have to agree with that, because when there's 11 of us kids, okay? And so we all get together, you start talking about different time periods and stuff like that, and you listen to their story, and then you listen to your story, and it's like, are you sure we were at the right place at the same time here? Because it's not how you remember it, so whose memory's right or wrong? Well, nobody's is, because it's yours. And yours is the memory that's right, and so trying to defend that, again, there's that conflict, it's how you justify it and what's going on emotionally, with you, regardless of what age you are. That's how you interpret, and that's how you store it in that memory, and that becomes your truth. And those are the things that run on autopilot, and so it really doesn't matter, because everything is so distorted. And then you start attaching, because all thought's magnetic, then you start attaching to other people's garbage when they start telling about a story that's similar, it's like, oh my gosh. So over the years, I've developed what's called a rah-rah system, where it really doesn't matter. You don't have to go into the story anymore. It's like, first off, you just recognize that Houston has a problem. Okay? All right, Houston, you got a problem going on in here, wherever it is, right? So what do? We have to recognize it, and then we just acknowledge it. When you can tell the subconscious that, hey, I acknowledge this issue as being the truth, it doesn't matter what it is, because it's so distorted, as we just described, Then the subconscious says, oh yeah, you're right. Okay. It kind of lets down its guard. It's kind of like a little kid when you give them a new toy, and then 30 minutes later you want to take it away from them, or you tell them they have to share with their sibling or something, and it's like they're going to fight to the bitter end. The subconscious is like that, so it's going to hang on to it because it's theirs. You gave it to them, right?
Sure.
And so, but when you say, yep, you're right, then it lets down the guard, and it's no big deal because you don't have to fight for it. And at that point they're ready to give it up, and then you can just release it. And because you can say, hey, I got another nice shiny object over here that's better than the one I'm going to let go of, and then replace it with your new truth and the belief that's going on in your current situation. And then you don't have that autopilot coming up there and bite,
Well, you made a good point when you talked about how we store things in our memory based on our interpretations. And that's why when you were talking about, your family members getting together and you're wondering, did we have the same experience? And you did have the same experience, but your interpretation of it was based on, yourself, your own thoughts about yourself, your limiting beliefs about yourself, and that's what gets stored. And so I think, you're absolutely right. It's really important for us to just acknowledge, how we feel about situations. And one thing that I find really helpful too, and that has helped a lot of the people I work with, is to recognize that you mentioned stories, right? We create a story around our experiences based on our interpretations, which becomes our truth.
Exactly.
So if we made up that story way back when, if you recognize a story that you've created that doesn't serve you, that causes you to feel pain and suffering, you have the opportunity to create a new story around that exact same event.
Right. And that's what
you can look at it from a completely different perspective, and it doesn't mean it isn't true. I mean, how do you know what's true? It's whatever you say is true, right? It's like, so I say to people, if you're going to make it up, make up a good one.
Heck yeah, make it a happy one.
You, right? Yeah, exactly. Create a story around it that works for you, and let that become your new memory.
Right. And that is so true, and there's a lot of, I like the science of things too, and so when the stories are coming out, and when they watch the brain, because now they can calibrate, the brain signals and everything. So when you're in a down mood and your thought patterns are running on, like anger or fear or anxiety or, anything that runs on a low vibration, which is what we call, and I just don't like the words negative and positive because they're just charges, right? But we have words that run on a low frequency, and what they trigger in the brain and how the body itself, how all the organs respond is quite interesting, because again, we hit those in that feel-good zone, what they call the feel-good zone. If you're thinking thoughts of negative things and unhealthy things and fearful things and poor little me things and all that kind of stuff, you're creating a release in that feel-good zone, because it all goes into the same arena, and it takes a lot more energy and effort to stay in a down zone than it does in an up zone. So that when you start thinking happiness and joy and fun, you're hitting the same feel-good zone, right? So different hormones are being released because of the charge that's hitting, which is interesting. And if you think about it, when you're happy, you have more energy, you feel lighter, and you can test it yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
Just go into it and you just start feeling your whole body just like weights down, And so when you open up into that excitement and happiness, it's so different. And you can rewire. You tell it, change the story.
And another thing, when you're talking about energy and frequency, that's why many people, and even research has proven this too, if you are feeling anxiety, or you're feeling down or depressed, one of the best things you can do is start focusing on gratitude, because you can't be depressed and grateful for something at the same time. So even if you have to start small, sometimes people think, well, what do I got to be grateful for? I don't have enough money to pay the rent or this or that. And they're focusing again on the things that are not working in their life.
Right.
But I'm like, start with, hey, I'm grateful. I got eyes that I can actually see. There's not everyone on this planet that can say that,
Yeah.
right? My legs work. I can walk. I can talk. I can taste food. I'm grateful for the sun. I mean, when you really go on that path of gratitude, I mean, I'm grateful that I have hot water for showers. That wasn't always the case when we were living in some of these other countries.
Oh my gosh,
we had to learn to ask when we went to rent a place, because you just assume hot water when you come from North America, right? Until you rent a place and it's like, oh, we didn't actually ask. Do you have hot water for showers? It's like, right? I mean, that's something to be grateful for. So we can always find things to be grateful for, and
Right.
the more we get into that energy, the more wonderful things start to appear in our lives that we have more to be grateful for.
Exactly.
So it feeds on itself, right?
It does feed on itself, and that's a great point to make, because it's like the Native American story, right? When the little warrior asks his dad, about this, because he had two people inside of him. One was this angry one, and one was this happy one, right? And he said, the battle that goes on, which one's going to win? And he says, the one you feed.
Exactly.
Right?
Love that story.
I know.
It's so true.
It is so true, because we live in this world of duality, right?
Yes.
And as you mentioned, if you have depression or if you have happiness, right? You got to be one or the other. You can't have both, not at the same time. It's totally impossible to be happy and sad at the same time. I wrote a book called Which Side of the Fence Are You On? And it's on the world of duality.
That's great.
It was one of the most fun books that I've written. It was definitely interesting. But when you really start to focus on that, so where you pay your attention, what you feed, and I really love the saying too, what the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. So when you break that apart, so your thought processing is where it begins. Where are you thinking, and what is it that you're thinking? And that goes back into, as you mentioned, changing the story. How are you going to rewrite the story? Are you living you for you? Are you being you the way you think other people want you to be, so that you can do what? Be accepted. And this is one of the things that I share with a lot of my clients is, there's billions of people in the world. I'll stake my life on it. There's going to be somebody out there that's really going to like you for who you are, and not who you think you have to be because of everybody else that's in front of you. And it really makes you start to look at things from a different perspective. And really, again, we go back into that perspective. How you perceive and how you interpret is what your story is.
And you're absolutely right. There's always going to be people that love you and people that don't, regardless of how you show up. So you may as well show up for who you are. Not like you said, who
it makes it easier to run around
right?
in this little skin bag, right?
It does. But people find it harder with family. Like, they just find it harder because people will sometimes say to me, they have an easier time creating boundaries, for example, with their coworkers or with friends. But when it comes to family, it's tougher. And I understand that. It's because we have more of an attachment to wanting to receive the love and the acceptance and the validation from our family. But when we can give that to ourselves and no longer need it from them, it becomes much easier to start having those boundaries with them in a loving way. And that's the thing too. Some people think a boundary means you've got to, put the stake in the ground and say, that's it. You're not going to treat me this way again. I'm not. It's not about coming from an angry place or this adamant place. It's about coming from a loving place, loving yourself enough to say, this isn't working for me.
Right.
And so you can tell the other person, I love you. I want to be in relationship with you, and this just isn't working for me. It's causing me too much whatever.
Right.
And it needs to stop. And they might not like it, and that's okay. We need to be okay with people not liking the choices that we make, because they're not going to like it if it doesn't give them what they want.
Oh wow! Now that
Right?
say that again, because that is so relevant. Say that again.
Yeah, people are not going to like it when you change things or when you create a boundary that doesn't give them what they want. When you give yourself what you want, but they perceive it as, well, now they're not getting what they want from you, that they're used to getting, especially if they've been used to getting it, and now you're saying no more. That can be really difficult.
Yes.
To stand in your power in those situations.
Yeah, it really does. Well, we got a little freeze up here. So, but as you know, things change in your life, and how you perceive it and how you respond to it. And not everyone is going to approve of the boundaries that you're creating, or of the boundaries that you thought you once had, right? So
then you're able to stand in your power and just lovingly say, I know I've been doing this for a long time, and it's going to stop today.
Right. We lost you there for a minute, and then you came back.
I know. I thought, well, you know what? I thought I saw you freeze there too, so I'm not quite sure what got in there and what didn't. But we'll know when you re-listen to it, right?
Yeah, I tell you, technology in today's world, because of of the situation and everything that's happening, and all the schools, stepping up to the plate and grabbing Zooms and, airtime and bandwidth. Oh my gosh, it's been absolutely crazy. So, but, life goes on. It doesn't matter, what transpires. And again, you work through those issues, and it's the same, whether it's technology or whether it's inner technology thought patterns, right? You just kind of move with that flow to see what's going to transpire. And, so the next moment is always an excitement. And again, we're talking about the emotional things, right? And that next moment, where are you in your emotional, mindset, right? Are you living in fear that every moment that comes, is there going to be a boogeyman behind here or behind there or coming out of here? Or, the uncertainties is the boogeyman, right? And and again, that goes back into childhood things too, right? And so when we look at that, or what's happening in today's uncertainty world, it triggers those stressors. And to really become peaceful inside is going to help you to become peaceful on the outside, to say, well, wait a minute. I can fear that there's going to be a boogeyman back there, or you know what? I can make whatever I want. And again, that perception, right? I can make whatever I want that's going to be in this situation, and recreate and reinvent your old belief systems and stuff like that. So it's an interesting world we live in, and in the understanding of it. And again, I like to go back into the science now, because I was in metaphysics kind of all my life, I guess, that I didn't really know that was a name for it until I had moved from little farm country Iowa to the big city of Denver, right? And that was in '79, and I started getting to know different people in alternative and in energy work and stuff. But it wasn't until in the 90s when I moved to Las Vegas when the metaphysical world really opened up to me. And wow, it's like it made so much sense of things that had gone on in my childhood that I didn't have an answer for. That all of a sudden it's like, now that makes sense. Now I get it. Right? And everybody thought I was weird, I was called weird and strange, and and you talk about family accepting, right? When I really started hot and heavy into the metaphysical world, and just because it was so a part of me. Wow, I got a lot of this voodoo, I was raised in the Catholic religion, 12 years in parochial school, and I was a rebel. I always went against the grain anyways, because there's a lot of things I didn't understand in some of the training, that was hammered into you, right? It's, but I don't get it, right? Well, it's not for you to get, it's just for you to just know, right? Just do it. You just do it, right? Just believe it, but it again, you talk about that conflict, so in all aspects of life, when you're in a conversation, if a conversation triggers a conflict inside, it's time for you to say, Houston, we need to have a discussion here. And you don't have to blow it up, in the moment of the experience, but make note of it. so that you can actually go in and begin to take a look at why did it trigger you that way, and where your
What's really
belief
going on?
is, and you know, because what was once your truth isn't always remaining your truth, and things that were once false all of a sudden start becoming your truth, because when you increase your database of knowledge and the experiences that you've had, you know, in your adventures, those interpretations begin to change, and you've got to stand, like you said, in your power, strong enough to say, wow, that's no longer a truth. That it does not serve me a purpose in the manner in which I stored it. So storage bank, we're going to make a change here, right?
Sure. And one way that can help too, that some people, you mentioned earlier, and it's really important that we need to be aware of our own thoughts and feelings before we can ever change them. And so one little tip that I often share is to just set a timer on your phone. You can set it for every 20 minutes, every hour, whatever time frame you want. And when the alarm goes off, just check in and ask yourself, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? Are these thoughts and feelings serving me? How can I shift them? What story's going on in my head? So it just kind of gives you an external reminder until it becomes more of an automatic internal thing.
Right.
And it works really, really well, because when you start becoming aware and start shifting them in the moment, because if you notice yourself in fear, it's like, oh, okay, so how can I shift that so that I'm not feeling fearful, that I'm feeling, you know, confident, or whatever it is that you want to feel. You do that more and more throughout the day, it becomes your automatic go-to place instead of the fear.
Right, exactly, and that's a really good point, because we live in fear. It's a fear factor world, shall we say? There's more of that jumping, and especially in 2020, right? Oh my goodness, and it's that uncertainty. You know, we're blowing out of our comfort zone and our predictability. We might be miserable, but we know that predictableness, and so it's a predictable misery. And so I'd rather have the misery I know than the misery I don't know, right? Instead of
because you already know you can survive the misery. You know, like you are surviving it, even if you don't like it, even if it's painful. You're doing okay on some level. But the unknown, like you said, it's like, am I going to be able to be okay with that? I don't know.
Yeah, been going the extremes when we talked about the duality world, right? The pendulum swings on two sides of the fence. You know, so when you recognize it, when you catch yourself in that thought, and that's a great idea, you know, setting a timer. Oh, what am I thinking? Because, you know, we have the same thoughts every day. I think they're saying like 60% or 70% of your thoughts every day are the same ones you've been having day after day after day. You know, are you going to be able to recognize every one of them? No, because they're so unconscious and they're just in a flash second, but your automatic pilot is on. But to recognize those that you are and the repeat, how many times do you catch yourself repeating that same story? You know, it's interesting. I've caught myself on numerous occasions, right? You know, all of a sudden going over an event that happened maybe 2-3 days ago, right? And it's like, why is this in my brain? Why am I wasting time thinking about this? It's like, it's not going to change. That's already over. It's 3 days old or a week old or whatever, you know? And it's like, why did it show up? If I wanted to have a different response, I should have done it on the spot. Not now. So quit wasting your time. Let's see. What is it, something that's going to be productive? Yeah, this is what I really should be, you know, thinking on, and you move yourself into that. So you start having these little personal conversations, and, you know, and when I work with clients too, you know, I tell them to start talking to yourself, and don't listen to your thinking thoughts, because they're going to really get you in trouble. Talk those thinking thoughts out loud sometime. Yeah, just go for a drive in the car, or, you know, lock yourself in a room or something, you know. But start talking those thinking thoughts out loud. It's better than any comedy show you'll ever watch. You know? Right? Because when you think a thought and when you speak a thought, they are definitely not in the same library, not even on the same planet. They are so extreme. You will get a good laugh. And so talking out loud is good. I mean, we were always trained. Again, here's another, you know, myth. You know, if you talk to yourself, you're going crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you know what? If you don't talk to yourself, you will go crazy. Right?
It's true. You keep it all inside. And sometimes people find it easier to talk it through journaling. That's another really wonderful
it
way
is
to get the thoughts out and just put it out on paper. The stream of
right.
consciousness writing, where you don't edit, you just keep writing.
Yeah, you just go and go and go.
You just
Yeah.
keep going. Even if you say, I'm wasting my time, this is a waste of time, I don't even know why I'm doing this. And when I've done that at times, like, stuff will start to come out and you're like, wow, that one was in there.
Yeah, and that's true. So it doesn't matter whether you're speaking it or you're writing it, you're releasing it. And that's the key, is to let it out, because we all store things. And we talk about the chakra system, right? The energy ports of the body, and the throat chakra is being able to speak your truth, right? Mm-hmm. Well, when you're not speaking your truth, you're speaking your lie, right? Mm-hmm. So lie to the world, but stop lying to yourself. So when you start swallowing what you're not wanting to express, you swallow it, right? And this is where you start to justify, and it goes into that heart chakra. And the heart chakra is the element of yourself. This is where you lose yourself or find yourself. And this is where the real truth is. But when you block that pain and you swallow again, it pushes it down. Now it goes into those lower three chakras, which are all about being the martyr, being the victim, or running in survival, fight or flight. And this is where the majority of us, function, is in those three lower elements, right? And so when you begin to regurgitate and start to bring up a lot of that past, issues that you've buried that's running on autopilot, it's going to hit that heart chakra. Well, a lot of times it's just speeds right by and it comes into the throat chakra, and all of a sudden here you are in an expression of anger and justification and defense, So when you find yourself going on the defense, you need to just take a deep breath and say, wow, where is this coming from? Because this is a conflict. And when you learn how to surrender to the circumstance, surrender is not giving up. When you surrender to that circumstance, you begin to recognize the conflict, and then the healing begins, right? Yeah, so because when you surrender, now there's no battle, and there's no war.
You're not resisting it anymore, right?
And now you win. That's when you win.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because people think surrender is like giving up in defeat and you've lost, and it's the opposite. Like
it's what gives you that power and that strength to really move through everything, because now when you're out of conflict, your whole thought processing changes, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's fascinating, the whole realm of conflict.
Yeah, the play on words is I like to play on words because it's the true interpretation of it versus what we've been, again, the programming and the thought processing. Because what is it? The surrender, you're waving the white flag, that means, hey, I win and you lose. It's not about winning and losing, right? It's how you play the game, right?
Yes.
Right? It's how you play the game. And when you surrender, you're winning the game, because now you're working in strategy and guidance, direction, focus. Otherwise, all you're doing out there is creating havoc and more problems, and you're defeating everything that you're trying to win.
Exactly. Yeah, your awareness increases when you start to surrender, because you're not using up all your energy to defend something that really isn't serving you anyway.
That's right.
Right? So you open up the portal to be able to actually see the truth and experience the truth in a way that serves you on a much higher level.
Exactly. Very well put. Very, very well put. And it's being able to really understand that. So if you're struggling with this conversation right here between giving up and surrendering, go to the dictionary and really get the termination, the interpretation of what it really is, what it means to, and it takes a stronger person, I guess we should say. It takes a stronger person to surrender than it does to keep fighting.
It takes humility too. It takes a lot of humility to say, I'm willing to look at this instead of trying to hold on to something from a place of fear.
Right.
Surrender is actually an opportunity to look at something from a place of love, because we either
Yes.
operate from fear or love. So fear, we know fear just creates more of the same. It doesn't, like we said before, what you focus on just gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
What is it you're feeding, right?
Exactly. So if you're not wanting to continue to experience fear or anxiety or stress, then it's important to look at what other part of you can you feed, and
Right.
feed the part of self-love and self-compassion. And surrender is like taking a responsibility, owning what is, but not from a place of blame, not from a place of, like I said earlier, beating yourself up. It's just
Right.
acknowledging. Because once we can acknowledge what's there, then we can let it go if it's not something we want to keep. But if we keep defending it, we're actually giving it more power to
Right.
just stay exactly where it is and get stronger.
Right. And that's what runs on that autopilot. So,
Exactly.
it's like you get all excited, you're out with your friends, or you're working on a collaboration of something, right? And everybody says, okay, who's going to do what? And then you make a volunteer. Yeah, I'll do that, right? Okay, no problem. So they got you down for that. And then all of a sudden, everybody disperses. And now the old program starts to show up, right? And then it keeps showing up, and it gets louder and louder. And you're like, oh crap, what did I just do? Now we run into that, what we call buyer's remorse, right? And it's like, what the heck was I thinking? Oh my gosh, I volunteered for that. Then you start trying to find an excuse to get out of it. So when things like that happen, those are the things that you want to really begin to recognize, right? As to where's the power. So you want to change that because it's exciting. You wanted to do that, and you were all excited about it, and everybody was giving you, the rah, go for it. Yeah, you can do this, right? And then all of a sudden, you're by yourself, and your subconscious says, who the heck do you think you are? You're going to do what? Are you crazy?
Yeah.
Right? But when you
Yeah.
can surrender to that and say, hey, that's how I used to be, but I don't want to be used to be anymore. I want to be something different and better. And that's what this show is all about, is becoming that better you. What is it that you can do today that's going to boost you to being that better self, right? And you begin to communicate with that subconscious. And again, it is about that surrendering, and just tell the subconscious, hey, you're right. But now we're going to work together, and we're going to change things, right? We're going to change it to better, because, that one don't work so good anymore. Let's see what we can do with this one and see if that works better. And the subconscious will agree with you when you quit fighting it. Right?
Yeah, again, fighting it just gives it more power.
Yeah.
So if you don't want something to continue in your life, it's important to stop fighting it, because that's a guarantee. It's not going anywhere. It's just going to get stronger if you keep fighting it. It's just just acknowledge it and just say, yeah, okay, I've let this run me for whatever number of years, and now I have more awareness, and I can make a different choice instead of, oh my God, I can't believe I let this run me for how many years, and I wasted how many years. That's just going back down that spiral.
Yeah, that's only going to keep it going for that many more, right?
Exactly. So you can choose that. I mean, we have free will. You can choose to beat yourself up for maybe thinking you took so long to get here, or you can celebrate the fact that you're aware now. You can start from this moment to make those positive shifts in your life. It's going to move you in the direction where you want to be, your better self, like you said.
Right.
We can make that choice in every moment.
And you're the only one that can make the choice. Don't let someone make that choice for you, because that's kind of what got it started off down the wrong track in the first place, right? And so looking back on where you came from is a good thing, but it's going to be a better thing when you look on where you're headed. And if you don't want your future to look like your past, you better shift right here in the now, because really that's all we have, right, is the now.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, and what we're thinking now, and what, those automatic thoughts and memories and everything else that we're experiencing now, if we keep focused on that channel, it is going to be brought into our future, because this now moment brings us to the next now moment and to the next now moment. So that's why it's just so important to monitor our thoughts in as much as we can and keep
Right.
shifting them into the direction of what we want to experience, what we want to create, instead of what we don't want. Because
Right.
a lot of times people are more clear on what they don't want, which is a good place to start, because sometimes people don't know what they want. I'll ask them, what do you really want? They go into, well, I don't want. And I'm like, okay, so let's now look at that list of the don't wants. And instead of I don't want this, what's another way to express the same thing from a I want that?
Right.
So just kind of, again, that's another way of reprogramming our minds and our autopilot. Instead of focusing on, I don't want this, I don't ever want to experience that again. Just tweaking that little bit, just
Right.
rewrite that statement or that story from don't to do. Just
Yeah.
each
And
time.
it's interesting that you say that, because that definitely is relevant. When you look at what the subconscious, connects with and hangs on to, it doesn't pick up the not part.
Exactly.
It just picks up the do part, right? So when you're saying I don't want, what your subconscious is hearing is I want.
Mhm.
Right?
Exactly.
So you better say what you want behind that,
Mhm.
and
And
start.
it's easy to do. You
Oh.
just do the opposite of what you don't want.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's the duality, like we talked about earlier.
That's
We live
right.
In a universe or in a world of duality. So if you know what you don't want, then you want the opposite of that. So just state that instead. There's so much more power in stating what you want.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So, what it is that you're charging, what is it you're feeding, right?
Exactly.
And you
Exactly.
have your negative charges and you have your positive charge, right? And one will
Uh-huh.
fuel the other, right? But because you need both. We're an electromagnetic being. We live on an electrical magnetic planet, right? So those charges are necessary. Everything. I mean, just the technology we're using here. If it didn't have both negative and positive charges connected with it, we wouldn't be speaking and seeing each other, right? We wouldn't have the lights on in the room, So all of these things are done by charges, by energy, by vibration, by frequency. And thought is nothing more than a frequency. And so how you interpret it and how you feed it, so you have emotions and feelings. Emotions is the word. Right? That's just the word. That's the object, shall we say, right?
Okay.
But the feeling is the charge. We connect to that.
And that's what creates the frequency of what we draw to us, is the feelings. That's why our feelings are
Right.
so important, with our feelings. How am I feeling? And to really do our best to feel good as often as we possibly can.
Right. Right. The old saying, laughter is the best medicine.
Yes.
And again, let's go back into the science. They've proven that, where people who have been really sick with, even life-threatening, diseases, where what they did is they shifted their whole thought processing. They never focused on any of the negatively charged anything, right? They watched comics, they laughed, they went out in nature, they just really shifted, and again, looking at that gratitude. So they moved into that gratitude space, that high elevation of positive charges. And all of a sudden, after several months of all of this, that devastation, that threat was gone. So the mind is very powerful, and it's been proven over and over and over. And it's not about, that's because they don't have anything different than you do. We're all created equal in every aspect. We have free will to choose or to not to choose, right?
Exactly. And like you said, we have free will to decide, what part of us we want to feed.
Yeah.
What part do we want to have grow? Right?
Yeah. Just try it. You might like it.
Exactly. And that's the thing. I tell people, just experiment. You don't have to take my word for it. Like, try it out. I mean, I had one client when I suggested she focus on gratitude, for example, because there was a lot of really very challenging situations with her ex and kids and parent alienation and all this stuff. And so she just was devastated and in a lot of pain and didn't think she'd ever feel happy again. And I suggested she start focusing on gratitude. Well, her initial response was like, yeah, that's not going to change anything. How's that going to change anything? I'm still going to have this and this and this and this going on. And I said, don't take my word for it. I said, just would you be willing to just experiment with it? Look at it like a science experiment.
Right.
And so she did. And now, she's just tells other people about how powerful just focusing on the gratitude, things started to shift in other areas of her life. And she's recreated a life of joy and happiness and connection, and that she told me she didn't think she'd ever feel again. And it was just that little exercise of gratitude. I said, every night, just think of 3 things. It'll take you 10 seconds? I said, we're not talking about a lot of time here.
Yeah, it's
right?
not like you're sitting there in this hour-long meditation.
No, it doesn't have to take a long time. And then I actually suggested to her too, just put a timer on your phone, and whenever, and you decide the frequency of it. If you want to do it every 3 hours, that's fine. Every 10 minutes, whatever you feel good about. And when it goes off, think of something you're grateful for. Just state it, feel it for a few seconds, and continue with whatever you were doing. You will be amazed at the difference it'll make in your life. And it did. Now she's telling everybody else.
Yeah, and it's the simple things in life that make the biggest changes.
Things.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Simple, consistent things, because it's not like you do it once, right?
Right.
It's not like I did my gratitude, for 3 minutes yesterday and my life hasn't changed. No, it's not going to happen overnight. We didn't get to where we are. Your feelings
That's
of
right.
depression or anxiety or stress did not occur in a 3-minute thought, right? It's an accumulation of time and time and time. And so we need to just replace that with an accumulation of more positive thoughts and energy, and gratitude is a great place to start. It's an easy place to start.
It is. It really is. And sometimes, we make things, well, all the time, we make things either difficult or simple, right? And again, that's another old belief, that if it's not hard, it's not worth doing, right? And
that's
so
another lie that we've bought into. We were
Exactly.
talking about lies, that most of our thoughts and beliefs are based on lies. That's one of them, I
Right.
believe, that it has to be tough. You've got to work through something tough to make it.
Yeah. And that's not always the case. To be tough sometimes is to be vulnerable or humble yourself, right? We have a little bit of a freeze here.
Oh, you're back.
Hey, you're back.
I was saying, you just froze on me. Did I freeze on you too?
Yeah, you did. So I don't know who's freezing what, but
I'm not getting any little pop-ups telling me that you've got limited bandwidth or whatever, but
yeah, that could be
It
on this
happens.
end very easily. But like I said, we've been struggling with some of the internet here. But oh my gosh, we are coming up on the hour, and Marisa,
Wow, already.
this has just been. I know, where did the time go, right? So it's been an interesting conversation, and I know the audience has loved it. I have loved every moment of what you talked about, because you're speaking my language, and that connection is really good. So if you have one more thing to leave with the audience, what would that be? And also let them know how they can reach out to you if they want to connect.
Sure. Well, one thing I love to leave people with is to just recognize and accept. We talked a lot about acceptance today, that everyone, including you, us, me, is doing the best that they can in any given moment, even if it doesn't look like it.
Right.
And a lot of people have difficulty with that sometimes. They think if somebody's being unloving or unkind, well, that's not the best they can do. They could choose differently. And yet, if they could choose differently, they would. And the reason they're acting the way they are is because of their own unhealed wounds that are just on autopilot coming out and being projected onto the people around them. And it doesn't mean it's okay. Again, it's not about condoning someone's behavior, but it's a lot easier to have compassion for people when we recognize that, as this quote you've maybe heard before, I don't know who said it, but I love it. And it's very simple. It says, hurt people hurt people.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? So when somebody's being hurtful, it's a clue for you that they're suffering on the inside. Because someone who's filled with joy and happiness and peace and exuberance, that's what comes out of them. right?
Exactly.
So if we can accept and recognize that no matter how people are showing up, they really are doing the best they can in that moment with their level of awareness, with their skills sets that they have, their tools that they have or don't have. If we can recognize that, then we're able to come from a more loving and compassionate place when we interact with them. So that's what I would love to leave people with. And if they do want to learn more about me and about the work that I do, they can go to my website, which is
Ooh, I
magnifyyourmagnificence.com.
like that. Magnify your magnificence. Woo, that
Yes,
is nice.
yes. I
That's
believe we
nice.
are all magnificent, and it's important for us to magnify that part of us so other
There
people
you
can do the
go.
same. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesomeness. Well, it's time to say go out there and do what? Be that best you that you can be, because Marissa and I are going to be the best we that we can be. And we will see you all on another show. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone.